Welcome to Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I'm your host. And in today's episode, I am extremely fortunate to have Paul Bangay as a guest. Paul is definitely Australia's most well-known landscape designer and one of the top designers in the world, I'd say. He does some international designs and has done for at least 26 years. So very lucky to have Paul on. And he's pretty generous with some advice that he gives out in this chat as well, including a good tip about how he goes about clearing the mind. And he also mentions advice that he gives to people about when he gets asked why they should get into design or how they should get into design. One of the things I loved about chatting with Paul was how he was clearly passionate about the industry right from the start. And I think that's a key with being successful in not only landscaping, but anything that you do. And I couldn't recommend doing the tour of his garden at Stonefields highly enough. It's just, such a special place to go to. And he's got a few books out, one specifically on Stonefields through the season, so definitely worth having a look at them. But he's also got one called Small Gardens, which we touch on in this episode. So plenty to listen to. So hopefully you enjoy this chat with Paul Bangay. Paul, thank you very much for joining us on the Landscaping Podcast. So the first question I've got for you is how it all started for you in the industry.
I think a lot of people say this, but my parents were very, particularly my mother was very interested in landscaping and gardens. She had a beautiful garden. She was a member of the Society for Growing Australian Native Plants and was very involved with plants and horticulture and landscaping. So I grew up with a culture of gardening and in a beautiful garden. And I went to Burnley. You know, my father was an academic at RMIT, and he said, well, you need to go get a education if you want to do that, and packed me off to Burnley. And I went to Burnley for four and a half years and got my degree and started from there. So, I think it's came from a passion of family love of gardens and a good education in gardens.
Is Burnley still teaching? Because it's insane the amount of real high quality plant people that went there.
Yeah. It's not the same as it used to be. I mean, it was taken over by Melbourne Uni when I was about 3/4 of the way through. And I think Melbourne Uni was sort of more interested in the real estate rather than the educational part of Burnley. But it continues. I hear it's not as good as, I think we were in the heyday when you were practical and you got academic as well, which I think was invaluable. But it's still going. No, I think it's still going.
So what was your first job that was horticulturally related?
I did, while I was at Burnley, I got a great job near Ballarat for a great family who I still work for to this day. And it was a big sheep farm and it was on a volcano. And it was my first garden I ever really designed around a big old Victorian house on a sheep farm. And it was called Larrandall. And it's in my first book, The Defined Garden. And I was just blessed to be able to get this commission, which was a huge commission for a young student to get.
Yeah. So you were still studying while you're doing that as well?
Yeah. Yes. So I was in my last year. Yeah. Yeah. They took a great leap of faith with me, and I was very lucky that they did that. It sort of really helped the start of my career.
So is that where did you then go, once you finished studying, you just went out on your own, or did you work for someone else at all?
No, I went on what I did is I started a nursery. I started a small boutique nursery in Hawkesburn in Toorak. And it was a little Victorian shop front, single fronted shop front with a big courtyard out the back, and started a little nursery there. And I landscaped the courtyard, and people came and saw the courtyard. Vogue Living sort of put on their front cover and got a lot of press because it looked so smart. And, people came in, bought plants and thought, oh, this garden looks quite nice. I think I can get this person to do my garden. So it started really, I think that was the first big step that I took that was really sort of positive in getting my career established.
Yeah, right. So did you have much of a love for natives as well to start off with, or were you more of the Toorak style?
Yeah, I did. I grew up with them, definitely grew up with them. My mother's garden was a native garden. It sort of developed over years and sort of transitioned from totally natives to, some exotics. But certainly we grew up with a native garden, and I had a great love for native gardens. I had a great passion for ferns, funny enough, for Australian ferns. And I sort of had a poly house I used to grow the ferns in. I had a little area of the garden, like a little rockery that I would do, and a little pond in there. And I sort of love ferns, and I've come back to them. I still really, really love ferns again now, sort of becoming more passionate about them. But we're using a lot of Australian natives in our plans and gardens now. We're sort of incorporating them with some more Mediterranean style plants. So we're sort of adapting to climate change in the hotter, dry climate.
Yeah, that makes sense. So after you started the nursery, did you start getting people, when you designed that, then they were wanting to get you to design their garden? Is that where it all branched off from there?
Yeah, they saw the little courtyard, realised I had a bit of a talent, and asked me to do their gardens. And then, other people saw the gardens, and I got magazine coverage, newspaper coverage in the days when magazines, carried a lot of weight. And it just sort of skyrocketed from there. Really, as soon as I had done a few and people had seen them, I got more and more commissions, and just sort of grew and grew and grew.
So when did you put on your first employee?
Well, in the nursery, we employed quite a few people. So it was, it was straight after finishing university. Went straight out and went into the nursery. Employed. I know we had like 3 or 4 of us there, maybe 5.
Were any of them helping with design early on?
No, not then. So in the nursery, it was just me, and I was drawing the plans myself. I was hand drawing them on a drawing board. Then I was very lucky and got a travelling scholarship through the Arts Centre in Victoria, and so I left the nursery, sold the nursery, and travelled around the world for 6 months on a travelling scholarship. And I shadowed other designers, and then came back and just worked from home, designing gardens, and started employing people fairly quickly to help me sort of draw up plans from that period.
So was that a big learning curve for you doing the international stuff? Did that change the way you designed?
Yes, it did. Whenever anyone asks me, how do I get started, or what should I do, I say travel and just see as many gardens as you can. Travel to different parts of the world, travel to climates that are similar to Australia, go to the Middle East, go to the Mediterranean, go to parts of America where you can see they've got similar climates as ours. Just experience as much as you can and see as much as you can. Travel was a really great part of my early career.
Yeah, I've heard you mention that before, like that you went to Iran and Saudi Arabia to see gardens there.
Not Iran, Jordan, and Syria.
Oh, sorry, Syria.
Yeah.
So have they got, like, is it a similar appearance in their gardens to what we have here with the native ones?
They're just completely different. They're quite formal in their layouts. They're sort of very traditional, very formal in their layouts. But their planting schemes are very informal, funny enough. But they just use water in a very wise way, and plants that have adapted to a very hot, dry climate. So it's maybe the way they use water in the garden, the way they water their plants, and also their plant selection, I think that's very sort of applicable to what we do in Australia.
So when did you get your first international design? Because you've done a few overseas. I mean, that would have been pretty exciting to get.
That didn't happen for a long, long time. Like it took, probably not for another 5 or 10 years after I first started that I started to get a few. We don't do many. We do maybe 1 a year or 2 a year. Increasingly more at the moment. But, I love doing just the odd 1 or 2 a year overseas. It's great. Sort of, it's nice to step out of your comfort zone and do something in a different and experience different nurseries, the way different contractors work overseas, the way clients interact with you. It's sort of, I love that challenge.
Pool fences don't seem to be as popular overseas either, do they?
No, pool fences are a great Australian complication, and I appreciate so they seem to get more and more complex every year, which is a great challenge for landscapers.
One of your international ones that I've seen recently is the one you did in France, the French country chateau.
Yeah.
How did that come out? Because I think they're Australian owners. Is that correct?
Yeah, she's Australian owner. She now lives in France full time, and she bought this chateau, and she actually came back to Australia, went on one of our garden tours at Stonefields, and she came up to me at the end of the tour and said, "Oh, would you like to do our garden in France?" I went, "Yeah, sure, hell, yeah." And it was a 3-acre walled garden with nothing in it. It was just a paddock with these lovely old 18th or 19th century walls around them, 4-metre high stone walls. And so it was just a blank canvas to create this wonderful garden in. And it's turned out really well. Like, I mean, I've been twice at the start of the process, but I haven't been able to get back for 2 years. I'm going to go again soon, which would be great. But yeah, it was a wonderful project. And she just did whatever we told her to do, which just led to this wonderful result at the end.
Yeah, it looks absolutely stunning, like especially in the summer photo that you put up recently.
Yeah.
So with the you mentioned Stonefields before, and before that you had a garden at Wood End that was
Yep.
it was quite popular. So how long ago did you start that one?
So I've been at Stonefields 18 years, and I was at Wood End for 8 years. So what's that? 26 years ago.
Yeah.
I started there. It was my first country property. I mean, I only had two really. And it was just magical. It was the old schoolhouse of Wood End. It was 100 years old. Had 2.5 acres of just blank canvas to create a garden in. It was just, I really loved it. The house was charming. Site was fabulous, and it was just nice. It was in a climate that I really love. I love cold winters, which Wood End has. Hot, dry summers still, but lovely cold winters.
So did you practice a lot there, or were you pretty experienced with what you were doing at that stage already?
No, I think I was pretty experienced with what I was doing there, but it was like I mean, both St Ambrose Farm, that was called, and Stonefields were still are great laboratories for me to try new plants in and try different styles in. So I think a garden designer's own garden is always a place of great experimentation.
What was it difficult moving from Wood End?
No, it wasn't difficult because I had Stonefields already. So I'd bought it about a year before, 6 months before I'd left Wood End. It was hard leaving that house. I really, really, really loved that house. But we ran out of water. It was during the millennial drought. We put on bad water restrictions. It didn't have a bore. And it was in the town. So, I could hear the train go by. I could hear cars. I could hear neighbours quite readily. And so I just wanted something a bit more rural, a bit more isolated. So, moving to Stonefields was exciting. So it made leaving St Ambrose Farm a lot easier.
Yeah. And was Stonefields just basically a paddock when you got there?
Just a cow paddock.
That's insane.
It had groups of Eucalyptus vimilaris, like 3 or 4 of them, right on the sides of it. But yeah, it was a cow paddock, and it's called Stonefields because all the fields are just full of rock, which makes gardening hard. But the place where the house and the garden is, I think, had been cleared of rock because there was no rocks in that area. So it was just a perfect place to create a garden.
So did you draw up a design for that as well, or were you just sort of making it up as you go, knowing in your head what you're wanting to do?
I was lucky that I could design the house and I could design the garden at the same time. So I definitely drew up the outline of the house and the garden at exactly the same time. So I knew exactly what I wanted to do from day one, and I just had great joy in drawing up both the house and the garden. So there's this wonderful synergy between the house and the garden. The outlooks from the house into the garden are just perfect. Like they just rise with each other.
And have you changed much of what you did originally there in terms of the plants?
Yeah, we all the time. I mean, we built a garden in the middle of a paddock, so it was full hot sun the whole time. And now our trees are starting to mature and parts of the garden are maturing. We're transitioning to more shady parts of the garden. So that's been a big change for us, going from plants that love full sun to plants that now require shade. So there's been that change. And we've added on, other parts to the garden. So we're constantly adding to the garden. I'm just trying desperately not to add too much to it, but the temptation there is just to keep adding and adding, sadly.
So is it getting any bigger, or are you just tweaking it within the footprint?
It was getting bigger up to about a year ago, and I sort of stopped, resisted making it because I've got to be able to look after it.
Yeah.
And we don't want to use too much water looking after it. So yeah, it stopped getting bigger, and we're just tweaking now. But up until a year ago, it was still growing.
And when did you start doing tours of there? Because I did one of the guided tours about 6 years ago, just about to the day, and yeah, it was absolutely insane. I couldn't recommend that highly enough for people who like any of the appearance of what Stonefields look like. It's even better in person. But when did you start doing that?
I don't know. Like very early on, we realised that people were seeing the garden. I mean, we opened it to the public for charity very early on, like when it was in its infancy. And I think we started doing the tours very early on. So maybe like 10 or 12 years ago.
Yeah, right.
We started doing, yeah.
And do you get many international visitors coming to do it?
Lots. I mean, up until the pandemic, we got lots. There was, in every tour, there'd be quite a few international people, quite a lot of interstate people. A lot of New Zealanders would come over, and the odd American or English person. Yeah, it was great for the area because we do bring in lots of tourists. It wasn't many locals, funny enough. A lot of interstate people.
Whenever, because you do some of your designs, you've got a studio there as well. So do you
Yes.
ever get, because I know when I do the occasional design, sometimes I might struggle to, might get a bit of a block or can't think of what to use. So you just go for a wander around to get inspiration, or do you?
Yeah, I do get inspiration from the plants there, but more about just like relaxing the mind and sort of, if you get a bit of a block or you feel like you're getting a bit fatigued, I go down, walk down to the house and have a cup of tea, or sit out in the back terrace, or walk around the garden, or talk to Tim or Remy, the gardeners, or it helps clear my mind doing that. Not so much getting inspiration from plants, but clearing the mind. It's definitely great for that.
Yeah. So do you travel interstate at the moment, or do you to try and get more inspiration, and you will be going international again when you can for the same reason?
Been back to England for Christmas, so we went for Christmas, and we're going back again soon. Interstate all the time, like it's all gone back to normal again now. I'm sort of going back to Sydney every second week. I've got a little place up there, and I use that as a base and go out and do regional New South Wales and a lot of Sydney work. So yeah, back, but full on back to international travel and interstate travel now.
Yeah, awesome. What percentage of your designs would be in Victoria?
Never really quite worked out. The majority, probably 60%.
Yep.
I'd say like 60% and 40% interstate or overseas.
Right. So do you do a lot of them by Zoom, or like what's the process you go through for that?
We tried to do Zoom. It didn't really work very well. You got to go and experience a place first. You can do the follow-up meetings via Zoom, but you actually have to go and walk around a garden, get immersed in the landscape. I don't think you can do anything totally by Zoom, but we're still doing a lot of Zoom meetings. I think that's probably one of the wonderful things that came out of what we've been through for years, that you don't have to travel to the site every single time. You can have meetings on Zoom and present plans and present planting plans and listen to architects and interact with other people via Zoom. It's much easier.
And with your business, how many staff do you have at the moment?
I think it's like 9 or 10.
Because I know you've got, I've dealt with Belinda, the plant supplier, and she's awesome to deal with. So you got a lot of designers in there as well?
Yes, we've got 1, 2, 3. We have 4 landscape architects in here working with us.
Yeah, right. So did you ever have a business mentor or anything that you learned the business from? Running a business?
The business side or the landscaping side or the design side?
The business side.
Not really. I mean, when I started off my little nursery, I did it in partnership with Kevin O'Neill, who was a famous florist in Melbourne. And they sort of taught me a few business skills, but I sort of had to learn it myself as I went along a little bit. I had lots of mentors when it came to design, but not so many mentors when it came to the actual business side of things. And I think that's what the universities don't do well, is they don't teach you how to run a business. Like, they pump you out as a landscape architect or a designer, and you got to fend for yourself when it comes to doing, the business side of things, which is the difficult part.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. So who were some of your design mentors?
David Hicks in England, like definitely David Hicks. I worked with him quite a bit, and we were great. We were great buddies. John Coote. They're probably people probably don't know these people. They're all dead now, sadly. John Coote, John Truscott. They were all great mentors of mine that were sort of mammoth people in the design industry back then.
And how did you go about meeting them?
I just got to. I mean, I think the design community internationally is quite small, and it always has been. Like, through magazines and publications, you get to know people and you get to meet people. Now via Instagram, everyone's sort of connected. So whenever I go to England, other designers say, "Oh, do you want to come have lunch or come see our garden?" Or so, it was back then. It was very easy to meet people because I think, as a designer, there's a lot of interaction, and now through Instagram, it's even easier. Yeah. Like wherever I go, if I post a photograph where I am, someone goes, "Well, we're around the corner. Come meet us, or come and have lunch, or something." So it's that.
Yeah. Are there any designers that you've mentored?
Not really. I mean, I probably don't do enough of that. I need to do some more of that. I mean, we've had people working here that have gone on to become great landscapers. Yeah. But not mentoring. I should really probably do more of that.
I know you used to do a bit of judging at the Flower and Garden Show as well. How long were you doing that for?
It was only like 3 times,
Okay.
maybe 3 times. Yeah, we do it for the design files now. We do the landscape category for the. So yes, I know. I no longer compete. I judge, which means I'm old.
That's why I'm doing judging as well. For some things it's disappointing to hear. One of the questions I was going to ask was if there was something that catapulted your profile. But was that basically your design of the nursery? What it sounded like getting on Vogue?
That I was lucky. I opened a nursery in a really good part of Melbourne. I landscaped it beautifully, you know, back when landscaping was just really taking off in terms of exposure. And I got a lot of magazine coverage and a lot of press. And I think that was definitely the catapult for the start of my career, definitely.
I can't remember if it was 2018 or 19, you were awarded the Order of Australia Medal for services to landscape architecture. Was that a nice surprise?
It was a nice surprise. Yeah, it was great. It was really, 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 really good. I got the Centennial Medal back in the year 2000. That was also a great surprise. Yeah, it's nice to be recognised. It's nice that gardening is recognised as well, I think.
Yeah. I asked anyone on Instagram yesterday that had any questions for you, and I had a good one that came through. Is what advice would you give to 21-year-old Paul Bangay when you were starting out of business?
Just indulge your passion. I think you know we're so lucky to be able to do what we do, and I think most people in the industry are very passionate about plants and gardens, and so just indulge that as much as you can. I've done that through travel. I've done that through books, reading books, publishing books. You know, just immerse yourself in gardens as much as you can. It's not just a 9 to 5 career that you, once 5 o'clock comes, you finish. Like, you know, go home, read about gardens, spend your life traveling around gardens, just immerse yourself in gardens as much as you can.
Yeah. And speaking of traveling gardens, have you got any favourite ones, whether they're in Victoria or overseas or interstate you've been to?
Lots. I mean, the problem with Australia is we don't have a culture of opening our gardens. Like, they're not open all the time. Like, if someone arrived into Melbourne, I said, well, that you go visit these gardens because they're open to the public. There's not many. I mean, we've got the botanic gardens, which are great, but there's not many private gardens that are open to the public like they are in Europe. But in Europe, yes, I've got lots of favourites over there. I mean, the Hauser and Worth in Somerset, I think, is a fabulous garden done by Pierre Baldoff. That's definitely worth visiting. Houghton Hall is definitely worth visiting. And where else? Sissinghurst, I know it's an old favourite and it's a bit cliched now, but that's definitely, I think, where someone should, you know, go and just look what was done a long time ago and how wonderful it is. Rousham's my favourite garden in the world. Rousham in Oxfordshire, done by William Kent. Magnificent garden.
What is it about that garden that you like the most?
It's a century garden, and it's done along a river, and it's quite naturalistic. It's like a big woodland garden, a stylized woodland garden, and with a lovely sort of canal of water that moves through it. I just think it's almost contemporary, even though it's 18th century. And William Kent's one of my favourite designers, so it's definitely, it should be on everyone's list of gardens to see.
Right. Yeah, the woodland part of Stonefields, I think, is one of my favourite sections as well. It's like you're in a different garden almost when you go in there.
And that's what we wanted it to be. We wanted it to be because it's hot and sunny and dry in the rest of the garden. Well, not dry, but hot and sunny. And then all of a sudden you go into the shady part of the woodland, and it's sort of very informal and very soft, and you come into the sort of middle lawn, which opens up and gives you sort of light again. And it's sort of very secluded and very sort of nurturing and sort of, you know, it takes you in and sort of looks after you. And I think that's why everyone thinks that's a magical part of the garden.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned your books before, and there's one, I think it's called The Small Garden, or it's about designing spaces in small gardens anyway. On the front cover is a car park that's also a water feature.
Yes.
Did you come up with that quickly, or?
It's not a big garden, and they wanted a water feature and they wanted a car park. And we said, well, we don't want it to look like a car park. So we sort of, you enter across some pavers with ground cover between them, which works very well. The cars seem to navigate that quite easily. And then in the middle of the paving, we created just a jet of water out of a sump. And so when the cars are not parked there, they turn that on. It's a water feature. And when the cars are parked there, it's a car park. So it sort of doubles up in space.
Yeah, that's smart. So has that book been more popular recently than ever because of the shrinking block sizes?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when we did a small gardens, the box garden, a long time ago, and then we decided to revisit small gardens because that's, you know, the great movement is towards smaller garden spaces. And yeah, it was extremely popular, and it's still in print, still selling quite well.
So what are some tips you have for small gardens? Like, do you have to like, completely remove lawn and just have a bit of garden bed and paving, or is there?
I think the only advice I give people for small gardens is like keep it very simple, don't clutter it, and overscale everything. Like make the spaces bigger and make the beds deeper than what you would normally do, because you get a lot more drama from sort of overscaling than you do from underscaling, and it makes the space look bigger. Use tricks like, you know, placing mirrors on walls. Try and create as much depth as you can in the garden by depth of planting and mirrors and tricks like that.
Mm. Have you got any future books planned?
Yes, there will be. We're just trying to work out what they are, but there'll definitely be some more books coming up.
Yeah. And the tours of Stonefields, are they every season you do those?
We do spring, summer, and autumn, and we do them on a Friday. You can just go to our website, bangay.com, and all the details are there. Yeah, they've all resumed back again. I mean, we missed them. You know, for 2 years, almost 2 years, we couldn't have them. We had a few short ones in when we opened up during the pandemic for short periods, but you know, they're back on full time. So yeah, if you just go to our website, they'll see all the details and the times there.
So what's coming up this year for the business? Is it just ticking along as normal, or is there any exciting things coming up?
There's a few exciting overseas jobs coming up. There is lots of interstate work, and there's lots of big gardens in Victoria. So, you know, it's business as normal, but, you know, every new garden is exciting for us. So there's some great projects coming up with gardens wherever they are in the world or Victoria. And
back in the earlier days, you were doing a lot more classical design, like planting choices, and then they've kind of changed to that, from my view anyway, a lot more perennials and that sort of thing. Is that just basically purely because of the climate changing?
No, I think that, well, there's been a stylistic change in the world. I think, you know, the world is a lot more informal now than it used to be, and a lot more casual and relaxed. And I think that's sort of evident in our garden styles. So you can see that that's reflected in what we do. So, you know, not so many straight lines, not so many perpendicular lines, more about soft curves, organic shapes, soft and flowery. You know, the formality is sort of not a great a place to be in garden design anymore.
They still look nice. I like the look of them.
Yeah, I mean, I still love a certain amount of formality in gardens, but I'm really loving this sort of softer new style. Definitely.
Yeah, I admire the people who do design with perennials, because it seems like that's just the next level of plant knowledge, knowing, you know, what to go where. It's a lot more complex. It appears to be.
And like getting the levels right, getting the sort of layering right, getting the colors right, getting when they're going to flower right. You know, it is a lot more difficult than designing a formal garden, but it's very exciting.
Yeah, it's a lot more active as well, because there's something happening all the time and changing.
All the time. Yeah.
Have you got a favourite type of material to use in your landscapes? So not plants, but something you like more than others.
We're loving Echo bringing this material called porphyry, and it comes in like cobbles, or it comes in rectangular baguettes, or it comes in sort of filetti, which is sort of just thin pieces of slate. We're loving that material at the moment. That's an Italian granite, which we just absolutely love. What else are we loving? We're using a lot more steel in our gardens, so like, you know, retaining walls with steel. They bend beautifully, so again, there's lovely sort of curvaceous walls. What else? Probably steel, I would say. You know, we're just using a lot more steel, black steel, Corten in our designs. Yeah.
And the final question for you, which will be fascinating to hear your answer in, is what's your favourite plant?
Everybody, I say it changes all the time. Like, constantly got favourites that I keep using, and it keeps changing. If I had one constant, it would be an oak tree. I just think planting an oak tree and watching that tree grow to maturity and knowing it's going to be around for another 200 years is very satisfying.
Good answer. I agree. That's a nice one too. Paul, could not thank you enough for coming on today. Really, really appreciate your time and Yeah, thanks so much for your knowledge.
Okay, thanks, Joel.